welcome seeker of forgotten truths to a tale, etched not in parchment but in the very stone of the earth, a story whispered by the wind through forgotten sepulchres, a chilling echo from a time when the veil between life and death seemed perilously thin. Tonight we journey not to the grand courts of celebrated empires, but to the shadowed valleys of a kingdom shrouded in myth. He was the favored son of King Era, a ruler of immense power whose reign had brought unprecedented stability and wealth to Zion. Theron was a child of unusual fragility, not physically weak, but possessed of a delicate constitution, prone to sudden fevers and periods of debilitating lapse. He possessed a keen mind, a profound understanding of Zylosian history and philosophy, and an uncanny grasp of the intricate spiritual doctrines that governed their society. His quiet demeanor, once perceived as weakness, was now seen as a sign of deep wisdom, a reflection of his profound connection to the ancestral realm. Imbued with the purest jade designed to protect the prince's essence, as it transitioned to a higher state, it was not a conventional burial chamber, but a sprawling complex. Its walls, these were not willing sacrifices, in the traditional sense, but individuals chosen for their profound connection to Prince Theron. The air within was cold, thick with the subtle hum of the jade, a resonance that seemed to vibrate through one's very bones. The chosen members of the Jade Guard, some weeping silently, others stoic in their terror, were led into the sprawling jade tomb. Their last glimpses of the world were of the High Priestess Lyra, her face impassive, her eyes holding an almost predatory gleam, and of the solemn, chanting figures of the priests, their voices echoing eerily through the subterranean labyrinth. The prince, his body weak, his consciousness fading in and out, was placed upon his jade sarcophagus, his eyes fixed on the faces of his loyal servants, his true guardians in death. He offered them a weak, grateful smile, unaware of the horrific fate that awaited them, unaware that his eternal peace would be built upon their living agony. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of burning incense and the unspoken terror of those about to be The stage was set, the ritual prepared, and the ancient kingdom of Xylos was about to witness a sacrifice, so profound, so utterly horrifying that its echoes would ripple through the ages, leaving an indelible stain on the fabric of time. The true horror was only just beginning to unfold, a chilling testament to the lengths to which power and fear could drive the human and inhuman spirit. His mind, clouded by fever and the priest's constant ministrations, was dimly aware of the jade-lined walls, of the solemn faces of the priests, of the strangely comforting presence of his faithful servants, who stood around his jade bed, their faces pale, their eyes filled with a mixture of devotion and unspoken dread. He believed, as the priests had gently assured him, that he was embarking on a sacred journey, a transition to a higher state of being, where he would forever watch over Xylos. He was told his most loyal companions would accompany him, not in death, but in a state of perpetual guardianship, their devotion forming an unbreakable bond that would transcend the mortal realm. His most trusted personal attendants, those who had served him since childhood, knowing his every whim, understanding his every nuance, his loyal bodyguards, whose lives were sworn to his protection, even his beloved concubine, a dancer of breathtaking beauty, whose presence brought him rare moments of joy. All were identified by the High Priestess Lyra as essential components of the ritual. Their families were notified, not with expressions of condolence, but with pronouncements of the great honor bestowed upon their loved ones, an eternal service to the future Emperor of Xylos, a sacred duty that would bring untold blessings upon their lineage. The carefully crafted narrative of honor and sacred duty masked the agonizing terror that must have gripped those chosen, the quiet despair that settled over their families, knowing their loved ones were destined for a fate far worse than simple death. And floors meticulously lined with vast, polished slabs of the purest jade, sourced from the deepest, most sacred mines. The air within was thick with the scent of freshly cut stone and the faint, metallic tang of the earth, permeated by an unsettling stillness. Artisans toiled day and night, their faces grim, their movements mechanical, knowing that they were building not merely a tomb, but a living prison. Murals depicting ancient Zylosian cosmology adorned the walls, scenes of the spirit world, of ancestors guiding the living, all rendered in vibrant mineral pigments. But beneath these seemingly benign depictions, a subtle, disturbing iconography began to emerge. Figures with empty eyes, their hands reaching out, almost pleading. But such a transition, Such an eternal guardianship required an ultimate sacrifice, a profound act of devotion that would solidify the prince's connection to the spirit world. It demanded that those closest to him, those whose loyalty was absolute, whose life force was intimately intertwined with his own, accompany him into this eternal sleep. They would serve as his perpetual guardians, their spirits bound to his, ensuring his safety and power in the afterlife, becoming a living extension of his royal court in death. King Arion, blinded by paternal love and the fear of losing his beloved son, and desperate to ensure Theron's eternal well-being, accepted the chilling proposal. He did not fully grasp the horrifying implications, seeing it only as the ultimate act of familial devotion, a sacred responsibility passed down from ancient, powerful kings. The high priests whispered of his destiny, of his unique sensitivity to the spirit world, interpreting his recurring fevers as moments when his soul wrestled with the immense power flowing through him. King Arion, desperate to secure his beloved son's longevity and legacy, clung to these interpretations, investing even greater faith and resources into the priest's increasingly extreme propositions. The whispers in the court were now less about Theron's fragility and more about his spiritual elevation, a delicate balance between human and something more. From his earliest days, there was a palpable solemnity about him, a quiet introspection that set him apart from his boisterous siblings. His body wasted away, his breath grew shallow, and even the most potent elixirs of the royal physicians failed to stem the tide of his decline. King Arion, consumed by grief and despair, turned to the high priests with a desperate plea. It was then that the high priestess Lyra, a woman of unsettling serenity and eyes as cold and deep as the jade mines themselves, unveiled the ultimate ritual, a secret known only to the innermost circle of the priesthood passed down through generations. She spoke of the Jade Guard, a concept whispered only in the deepest shadows of their history, a ritual so profound, so utterly consuming, that it was reserved for the most sacred and imperiled of royal heirs. It was, she explained, a means to transcend the frailties of the mortal coil to ensure not just longevity, but an eternal guardianship, a perpetual connection to the ancestral realm that would preserve the prince's spirit and vital essence beyond the reach of physical decay. His eyes, the color of ancient river stones, held a wisdom beyond his years, and a curious, almost melancholic gaze, as if he perceived truths hidden from others. He spent hours in the royal ancestral crypts, not in childish fear, but with a profound, almost spiritual fascination, tracing the intricate carvings on the jade sarcophagi, listening to the whispered legends of the long-dead kings and queens who lay entombed within. The ancient realm of Xylos, a place where the pursuit of immortality cast a darkness so profound it devoured the living. These priests, shrouded in robes, woven with threads of jade and silver, held immense sway in Xylosian society. They were the intermediaries between the living and the dead, the keepers of ancient rituals, and the interpreters of divine will. It was they who first introduced the concept of spiritual replenishment for the young prince, a series of increasingly elaborate rituals designed to imbue him with the strength of the ancestors. Drawing upon the concentrated essence of jade, Theron was adorned with jade amulets from birth, his bathwater infused with jade dust, his chambers lined with polished jade panels that seemed to hum with an unseen energy. The rituals grew more intense as his fragility persisted, moving from passive absorption to active participation, often involving long periods of fasting and meditation in the chilling confines of the ancestral tombs. Forget, for a moment, the comforting narratives of heroes and legends. Tonight, we descend into a chapter so grim, so unsettling, that its true details have been meticulously erased from the annals of polite history, leaving behind only fragmentary whispers and the cold certainty that some horrors are too profound to ever truly vanish. Our story unfolds in an age long before the rise of the great dynasties, in a time when the very air was thick with ancient beliefs, when reverence for ancestors bordered on obsession, and when the line between absolute devotion and unimaginable cruelty blurred into a single, terrifying truth. The kingdom of Xylos was renowned not for its martial prowess or its vast territories, but for its unparalleled mastery of jade, that exquisite stone, believed to embody purity, wisdom, and the essence of the ancestors. The very mountains that cradled Xylos were veined with deposits of the most luminous jade, and the Xylosian artisans transformed it into objects of breathtaking beauty. ceremonial weapons, intricate sculptures, and most importantly, burial masks and effigies for their deceased royalty. For the people of Xylos, jade was not merely a precious gem, it was a conduit to the spirit world, a solidified form of ancestral blessing, and the ultimate symbol of eternal life. Their entire society revolved around the veneration of the departed, believing that the ancestors, if properly honored, would ensure the prosperity and protection of the living realm. This deep-seated belief, noble in its origin, would ultimately twist into a horrifying perversion, culminating in a ritual so dark, so utterly devoid of human compassion, that it would forever scar the soul of Xylos. Into this world, saturated with reverence for the dead and the pursuit of everlasting lineage, Prince Theron was born. King Arion, deeply devoted to his fragile heir, sought every possible means to bolster Theron's health, consulting not only the most skilled physicians, but also the revered high priests of the ancestors. As Theron matured, his physical health remained precarious, but his intellect blossomed. The crucial turning point came during a particularly severe illness that gripped Prince Theron in his late adolescence. The ritual Lyra explained with a chilling calm involved the creation of a living tomb, a sacred resting place built beneath the earth. The construction of Prince Theron's tomb began almost immediately, a feverish, clandestine undertaking deep beneath the royal palace. As the tomb neared completion, the selection process for the Jade Guard began. It was not a voluntary act. Prince Theron, now a pale wraith, consumed by his illness, was brought into the finished tomb. The final day arrived. The sky above Xylos was clear, a brilliant, indifferent blue, in stark contrast to the profound darkness unfolding beneath the earth. The air in the jade-lined tomb grew heavy, not merely with incense and the scent of damp earth, but with the suffocating weight of unspoken fear. Outside, the Xylosian sky remained deceptively clear, an azure expanse oblivious to the horror unfolding beneath. His breathing was shallow, his eyes fluttering open and closed, catching glimpses of the faces of his loyal servants surrounding him. He saw their devotion, their fear, their absolute stillness. High Priestess Lyra moved to a central altar, a massive block of dark jade, and with a ceremonial dagger, pricked her own finger, letting a single drop of blood fall onto the obsidian surface. The priests, now outside the main chamber, began to activate ancient mechanisms. From hidden vents in the jade walls, a fine, almost invisible vapor began to permeate the air. It carried a faint, sweet scent, alluring yet cloying, a perfume that seemed to lull the senses, even as it tightened its grip on the mind. This mist, the ancient texts suggested, contained pulverized jade dust, infused with potent hallucinogens derived from rare, subterranean fungi found only in the deepest Xylosian caves. The energy within the tomb, the combined life force and terror of the entombed, was building, a potent wellspring of spiritual power that the obsidian heart, as she called it, would absorb. Her eyes, fixed on the jade facade of the sealed tomb, seemed to gleam with an unholy satisfaction. He saw Prince Theron, still lying peacefully on the sarcophagus, his face serene. The hum, the mist, the controlled deprivation, these were all designed to ensure that the spirits of the Jade Guard did not simply pass on to the ancestral realm. The jade lining the tomb glowed with a final, intense burst of light, then settled into a low, steady luminescence, a permanent beacon of the grim success of the ritual. High Priestess Lyra stepped back from the altar, her face devoid of emotion, her task complete. King Arion, witnessing the final radiance of the tomb, believed his son was finally at peace, surrounded by his eternal guardians. He raised his hands in a gesture of profound gratitude, unaware of the unimaginable cruelty that had just transpired beneath his feet, a cruelty sanctioned by his own desperate love and the insidious power of a twisted belief system, but were instead trapped bound to the prince's sarcophagus, forced into a perpetual state of guardianship. The official decree declared that Prince Theron had ascended to the ancestral realm, accompanied by his most loyal servants, chosen for their unparalleled devotion to continue their service in the afterlife. Statues were erected, prayers recited, and the tale of the Jade Guard became a cornerstone of Xylosian lore, a testament to absolute loyalty and eternal service. But beneath the surface, a chilling truth lay buried, a truth etched into the very core of the earth. The prince was not merely dead, He was entombed in a jade prison, his slumber watched over by the perpetually tormented spirits of those buried alive with him, their silent screams forever echoing through the cold, unyielding stone. The haunting images were not just of a tomb, but of eyes wide with terror in the final moments, of silent gasps for air that never came, of souls irrevocably bound to an eternal, agonizing vigil. The chilling reality of Xylus's quest for eternal life was finally fully manifest, a horrific testament to the dark depths of human ambition and the terrifying perversion of sacred belief. The echoes of their final moments, the silent screams within the jade prison, would forever haunt the hidden history of Xylus. Their essence, their life force, was not destroyed, but redirected, woven into the very fabric of the tomb, becoming a living energy source for the prince's eternal slumber. They were not merely buried, they were transformed into eternal sentinels, their spectral forms forever bound to watch over their prince, their silent screams echoing through the jade. Depths unheard by the living but felt by the very stones of the earth. A profound sense of failure washed over him. He couldn't protect his prince, not even from this. His last conscious thought was of his oath, and then a desperate, silent scream for breath that went unheard in the silent jade-lined prison. Alara, the attendant, her face pale as jade, reached a trembling hand towards an unseen comfort, her lips forming a silent prayer before her hand dropped, lifeless. Lynn, the concubine, her beautiful face serene in its final moments of artificial tranquility, ceased her shallow breathing, a single, unfallen tear glinting on her cheek in the faint jade light. One by one, the life force of the jade guard flickered and extinguished, their bodies slumping into permanent stillness on the cold jade floor, their eyes wide, eternally fixed in silent horror or vacant peace. King Arian, still observing from a distance, surrounded by his own fearful advisors, watched with a heavy heart, believing he was witnessing a sacred, albeit somber, passage. He saw the jade panels glow with an intensified light, interpreting it as a sign of his son's ascension, unaware that it was the desperate, dying light of his loyal subjects. Its purpose was to induce a state of profound trance, blurring the lines between reality and illusion, softening their minds for the ultimate, spiritual transference. Hidden vents, previously circulating the hallucinogenic mist, now began to draw out the air, imperceptibly at first, then with increasing efficiency. This was the final release, designed not to suffocate quickly, but to gradually deprive the body of its life-sustaining breath, forcing the spirit, now disoriented and weakened by the hum and the mist, to detach from the mortal coil and bind itself irrevocably to the prince's eternal essence. As the oxygen levels dropped, the entombed guardians, already in a trance-like state, experienced a profound, increasing pressure in their chests, a desperate gasp that never found air. Their hearts, though weakened, beat with a frantic, dying rhythm, their last moments filled with the primal urge to breathe. A final, agonizing struggle for life that served as the ultimate offering to the obsidian heart. The guardians began to see spectral figures in the dim, unearthly glow of the jade, figures that resembled their loved ones, their ancestors, beckoning to them, offering false comfort, dissolving their will to resist. A low hum filled the tomb, gradually increasing in pitch, vibrating through the floor, through the very air. He fought against it, trying to focus on his duty, on the prince, but the hum was relentless, the mist insidious. He saw his family, their faces distorted by the shimmering haze, reaching for him, whispering promises of peace. He tried to speak, to call out, but his throat felt constricted, his voice a dry rasp. Ilara, the attendant, succumbed more quickly. Her tears stopped flowing, replaced by a vacant stare, as she drifted into a state of semi-consciousness, murmuring softly to unseen entities. Lynn, the concubine, collapsed gracefully, her slender body folding onto the jade floor, her breath shallow. Her lips parted in a silent, dreamlike whisper. The others, one by one, followed, their bodies slumping against the cold jade, their minds lost in the waking nightmare of the ancestral mist. This was the resonance, a key element of the Jade Guard ritual, designed to subtly destabilize the minds of the entombed, to erode their sense of self, making them more pliable, more receptive to the final, spiritual binding. They were alive, but their minds were being systematically dismantled, their bodies rendered helpless. They were aware, in a fleeting, terrifying way, of the cold jade pressing against them, of the suffocating silence broken only by the incessant hum. But they could not react, could not move, could not cry out. They were conscious prisoners in their own bodies, awaiting a fate more terrifying than any quick death could offer. This was the true horror of the Jade Guard, not mere sacrifice, but a prolonged, exquisite agony of the spirit, designed to prepare their essence for its eternal binding. The hum was relentless, a constant, insidious drone that gnawed at the edges of their sanity. It was not loud enough to deafen, but pervasive enough to prevent thought, to induce a profound sense of disorder. The chosen guardians began to sway, their hands instinctively reaching out for something to steady themselves, only to meet the cold, unyielding jade. "This," she proclaimed in a voice that seemed to echo from the very depths of the earth, "was the first binding, the sacrifice of the living to the eternal." The air grew perceptibly colder, the shadows deeper, as if the very light in the chamber was being drawn inwards. This was not a quick, merciful ending. This was a process, deliberate and drawn out, designed to extract every last ounce of their living essence. He believed, as he had been taught since childhood, that this was the path to ultimate spiritual elevation, a grand journey into the ancestral realm. Massive, intricately carved jade panels, hitherto unseen, began to slide into place one by one, sealing off the entrance to the tomb, plunging the chamber into an almost complete darkness broken only by the faint, unearthly glow emanating from the jade lining the walls and the even fainter pulsing light from the obsidian altar. The living members of the Jade Guard gasped, a collective sound of primal fear, as the last sliver of natural light vanished, replaced by the suffocating reality of their impending entombment. Their world was shrinking, closing in, becoming a perpetual, jade-lined night. He was a prince embarking on his destiny, and his most trusted companions, bound by duty and love, were to accompany him into this perpetual state of grace. He offered them a weak, almost imperceptible smile, a final gesture of princely gratitude, utterly unaware of the unimaginable torment that awaited them, a torment conceived, not for his death, but for his supposed eternal life. Within the earth, the final preparations for Prince Theron's eternal guardianship were underway. There was Kale, the prince's most trusted bodyguard, a man of immense physical strength, whose hands, usually gripping a sword, now trembled almost imperceptibly at his sides. His eyes, fixed on his prince, held a desperate loyalty mixed with a dawning, terrible comprehension. Beside him stood Alara, the prince's personal attendant since his infancy, a woman whose life had been dedicated to his comfort and well-being. Tears traced paths through the dust on her cheeks, but her posture remained rigid, a testament to her ingrained servitude. In another corner was Lynn, the young concubine, her ethereal beauty now marred by a profound, heart-wrenching sorrow. Her gaze was fixed on Theron's face, a silent farewell to a life that had brought her fleeting moments of tenderness, now ending in this unspeakable way. Other attendants, lesser bodyguards, scribes, and even a beloved court musician who had soothed the prince's fevers with his gentle melodies, completed the circle. They were the chosen, those whose lives were deemed expendable for the supposed eternal peace of their prince. The high priestess Lyra, her serene face a mask of chilling determination, oversaw every meticulous detail. Her movements were precise, her voice a low, hypnotic chant that filled the jade chamber, weaving a spell of ancient power and dread. The other priests, their faces grim and impassive, followed her lead, their own chants forming a resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of those present. Prince Theron, now almost completely succumbed to his illness, lay upon his intricately carved jade sarcophagus. The members of the Jade Guard stood in designated positions around the prince's sarcophagus, their faces a tableau of human emotion caught in the vice of inescapable fate. The chanting intensified, rising to a crescendo that vibrated through the jade walls. With a series of chilling commands, Lyra directed her junior priests to begin the sealing. The ritual continued, not with violence, but with insidious, psychological torment. The next stage of the ritual involved the introduction of ancestral mist into the chamber. Kale, the bodyguard, felt his immense strength draining, replaced by a leaden weariness that settled into his bones. This was the living in. They were not yet dead, not yet deprived of breath. Outside the tomb, the high priestess Lyra continued her chanting, her voice now resonating with an almost triumphant tone. The final stage of the binding ritual within the tomb involved the slow, controlled depletion of oxygen. Kale, the bodyguard, felt a searing pain in his lungs, his vision blurring, his mind struggling to break free from the suffocating mist. But this was not merely death. According to the ancient Zalosian texts, Elias would later uncover, the ritual's true horror lay in its intention. Outside, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the ground, a sigh from the earth itself. The kingdom of Xylos mourned its prince, but not with the wails of despair typically accompanying a royal death. There was a strange solemnity, a hushed reverence. The great ceiling of Prince Theron's tomb plunged the heart of Xylos into a deceptive peace. Above ground, the rituals of ancestral veneration continued, seemingly undisturbed. An intimate knowledge of the earth began to report strange occurrences. They spoke of a pervasive, low hum that seemed to resonate from the very veins of jade, a sound that was not mechanical nor natural, but deeply unsettling. King Arian's own health, once robust, began to subtly decline. Her skin, once smooth and unblemished, developed a faint, almost translucent quality, and there were dark circles beneath her eyes that no amount of rest could erase. The spirits of the Jade Guard, unwillingly bound to Prince Theron, were not resting peacefully. Their essence, their life force, was indeed being siphoned, but the process was not perfect, not serene. The ancient texts, which spoke of the obsidian heart's ability to preserve essence, failed to mention the lingering agony of those unwillingly bound. The decline of his own health, the chilling visions in his sleep, the pervasive gloom that had settled over his once vibrant palace, these were too profound to dismiss. He began to question, subtly at first, the true nature of his son's eternal guardianship. His advisors, fearful and hesitant, offered no clear answers, their own faces betraying their growing unease. An obsidian, to be built around the existing jade tomb. Leader Meta believed to absorb and contain harmful energies. An obsidian known for its ability to cut off spiritual connections would, she argued, create an impenetrable barrier, silencing the jade's lament and severing the link between the tormented spirits and the living world. This new undertaking was even more secretive than the first, conducted in the deepest hours of the night, employing only those most fanatically loyal to the priesthood, or those too broken by the pervasive fear to refuse. They toiled in silence, their faces illuminated by the flickering oil lamps, as they meticulously encased the shimmering jade tomb in a thick, dark shroud of lead and obsidian, effectively burying the living burial beneath another, even darker, layer. The once unshakable faith in the high priesthood began to crack, replaced by a gnawing suspicion that something unspeakable had occurred, something that defied the benevolent image of their revered ancestors. The low hum ceased, the pervasive coldness dissipated, the terrifying dreams became rarer, less vivid, the wilting gardens showed faint signs of renewal. The lead and obsidian had indeed created a barrier, cutting off the living from the cries of the entombed, but within that dark shell, the suffering continued, amplified by its confinement, echoing endlessly in the newly created void. The spirits of the Jade Guard were now truly isolated, their silent screams trapped in a perpetual, unhearing darkness, their torment echoing only within the confines of their double prison. The haunting images were no longer just of bodies within jade, but of trapped souls, their agony intensified by their enforced isolation, their perpetual vigil now one of unceasing, unheard torment. The earth whispered no more, but the jade beneath it continued to weep, a sound only the deepest, darkest parts of the earth could now hear, a secret testament to a kingdom's ultimate, horrifying sacrifice. The stage was set for a terrifying archaeological discovery, for the eventual unearthing of a truth too dark to remain buried forever. A collective sigh of relief, unspoken but deeply felt, spread through the kingdom. The high priesthood declared it a sign of the prince's ultimate ascension, his spirit now fully integrated with the ancestral realm, his guardians at peace. King Arian, his health slowly beginning to recover, accepted this explanation with profound relief, choosing to believe in the comforting narrative over the lingering, unsettling questions in his heart. Each breath they had yearned for, each silent scream they had suppressed in their final moments, each ounce of terror. Miners, too terrified to speak openly, simply stopped reporting to work, citing vague illnesses or bad omens. Those who did venture into the depths found the oppressive atmosphere unbearable, their spirits crushed by the pervasive dread. The jade itself, when brought to the surface, seemed less vibrant, its color duller, as if it too was weeping for the horrors it contained. Trade routes, once bustling, saw fewer merchants, deterred by the unsettling rumors emanating from Zillow's tales of a kingdom shrouded in an inexplicable melancholy. Its people, haunted by unseen and despair they had felt, was now echoing, amplified, within the jade prison. The ritual, while successful in binding the spirits, was not containing their suffering as perfectly as the ancient texts had promised. The Jade Guard was not a silent, peaceful cohort, but a restless, anguished multitude, their collective agony threatening to shatter the delicate balance of the spirit world, and by extension, the living world. The whispers in the jade were growing louder, the dreams more insistent, the earthly manifestations more undeniable. The price of Prince Theranos' eternal guardianship was proving to be a burden too heavy for Xylos to bear. She knew she had to act, not to release the spirits. That was unthinkable, a violation of the sacred oath. But to silence their torment, to suppress the psychic reverberations that threatened to undo the very fabric of the kingdom. Their tormented spirits, prevented from passing to the ancestral realm, were battering against their invisible confines, their collective agony creating a psychic pressure cooker that strained the very fabric of the tomb. Her voice, once hypnotic, sometimes carried an almost imperceptible tremor, amplifying their suffering and transmitting it upwards into the earth, into the dreams of the living, into the very air of Xylos. The low hum the miners heard was the vibration of their incessant, unheard cries. The inexplicable coldness was the chill of their boundless despair. The wilting gardens were a reflection of the draining life force from the land, responding to the immense spiritual weight pressing down from beneath. The jade artifacts pulsed, because they were imbued with the very essence of suffering, acting as conduits for the restless, tormented spirits within the tomb. She spent increasingly long hours in silent meditation before the sealed tomb, her face a study in concentrated effort, as if she were wrestling with an unseen force. Shamans and seers, particularly those from the remote mountain villages, grew pale and withdrawn. They spoke of visions, of a vast, unseen sorrow clinging to the land, of ancient pacts, twisted into instruments of profound cruelty. Some fell into comas, their minds overwhelmed by the ceaseless, silent chorus of suffering emanating from beneath the earth. Others, driven to madness, began to rave in the streets, speaking of jade chains and living burials of faces trapped behind stone walls. Their words, dismissed as the ramblings of the insane but planting seeds of unease in the hearts of those who listened. She dismissed the concerns of the king and the subtle shifts within the kingdom, attributing them to the natural ebb and flow of cosmic energies, or the resistance of lesser spirits to the prince's ascension. But privately, in the deepest chambers of the priesthood, she intensified her own rituals, her chants growing more forceful, more desperate, as if she was trying to contain something vast and powerful that threatened to burst its confines. He suffered from restless nights, plagued by dreams of an oppressive darkness, of distant, muffled sounds he couldn't quite decipher. His beloved gardens, meticulously maintained by generations of royal gardeners, began to show signs of inexplicable decay. Vibrant blossoms wilted prematurely. Ancient trees groaned and withered without apparent cause, their leaves turning brittle and black. The very earth within the palace grounds seemed less fertile, less alive. The jade artifacts displayed throughout the palace, once revered for their beauty and spiritual significance, now seemed to possess a subtle, unsettling aura. Courtiers reported a chilling sensation when passing by certain jade sculptures, a feeling of profound coldness that lingered long after they had moved away. Some swore they heard faint whispers emanating from the jade at night, indistinct but profoundly sorrowful. It was a vibration that settled in their bones, a resonance that seemed to carry an echo of something ancient and tormented. They reported their tools growing inexplicably hot, even when not in use, and the jade itself, usually cold and inert, sometimes seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light, like a suppressed heartbeat within the stone. These were dismissed by the royal overseers as mere superstitions, the imaginings of men toiling in the dark depths, their minds playing tricks on them. But the miners knew better. They knew that jade spoke, and what it spoke of was not peace. King Arian, his heart heavy, but convinced of his son's eternal ascension, focused on the governance of his kingdom, drawing comfort from the high priest's assurances that Theron now watched over Zillos from a higher plane, not just among the common folk, but even within the hallowed halls of the royal court. These were not the common nightmares of ambition or loss, but vivid, visceral experiences of suffocation, of being pressed by unyielding stone, of silent screams that tore at the throat but produced no sound. Dreamers would awaken in a cold sweat, their chests aching, their lungs burning, convinced they had been trapped in some unseen, airless void. Some spoke of seeing faces in their dreams, pale and distorted, their eyes wide with terror, their lips moving in a perpetual, unheard plea. These faces, though indistinct, bore a chilling resemblance to those who had been chosen for the Jade Guard. The royal physicians attributed these widespread nightmares to miasmas or unsettled humors, prescribing calming draughts and dismissing the unsettling patterns. But the patterns persisted, growing more frequent, more intense, reaching even those who had no direct connection to the entombed. It was as if the psychic residue of the living entombment was permeating the very collective consciousness of Zion, a silent scream resonating from the depths of the earth, a perpetual guardian whose spirit was fortified by the unwavering devotion of his Jade Guard. The official narrative was powerful, pervasive, and profoundly comforting to a people deeply rooted in the worship of their ancestors. Yet, beneath the meticulously crafted facade of reverence and tranquility, a darker truth began to stir, a chilling ripple emanating from the very earth where the prince and his living guardians lay entombed. It started subtly, as all profound disturbances do. First, the miners in the deepest jade quarries, renowned for their stoic endurance. Then came the dreams. The most unnerving manifestations, however, were observed by those closest to the royal family, particularly within the palace itself. High Priestess Lyra, despite her outward serenity, began to show subtle signs of strain. The source of these increasingly unsettling phenomena lay deep within the jade tomb itself. The jade, revered for its purity and connection to the ancestors, was now acting as a vast resonant chamber. The most sensitive individuals, those with an innate connection to the spiritual realm, began to exhibit more extreme symptoms. King Arion, despite his faith in Lyra, could not ignore the escalating signs. The economic stability of Xylos also began to fray. The jade mines, once the lifeblood of the kingdom, saw a sharp decline in production. High Priestess Lyra, now visibly strained, understood the danger. Her solution was as chilling as the initial ritual. She proposed the construction of a deeper layer, a warding shell of lead. As the final layers of the warding shell were laid, a profound silence descended upon Zion. But the silence was not one of peace. It was the silence of suppression, of an unspeakable torment sealed away, not resolved. Centuries turned into millennia. The once mighty kingdom of Xylos faded into legend, its cities swallowed by the encroaching sands of time, its grandeur reduced to dust and forgotten whispers. The tale of Prince Theron and his Jade Guard, once a cornerstone of their history, became a mere myth, dismissed by later civilizations as a morbid folk tale, too fantastical to be true. Geological shifts, the relentless march of erosion, and the subtle movements of tectonic plates conspired over countless generations to bring fragments of Xylos back to the light. Driven by scientific curiosity and the insatiable human desire to uncover lost civilizations, expeditions ventured into the desolate regions where Xylos once stood, and fragments of what appeared to be religious iconography, all pointing to a highly sophisticated, deeply spiritual people. The scale of the jade usage was unprecedented in the archaeological record, hinting at immense wealth and a profound reverence for the stone. As the dig progressed, unearthing more substantial structures, the team found themselves drawn to a particular anomaly, a subtle depression in the earth, barely discernible, that seemed to resist the natural erosion of the surrounding landscape. What they found beneath sent a collective gasp through the excavation team, a mix of awe and profound bewilderment. Revealed before them was not just another layer of earth, but a massive, sprawling complex constructed entirely of gleaming, luminous jade. The stone glowed with a faint, internal light, an ethereal green that pulsed with an almost imperceptible rhythm, illuminating intricate carvings of Xylosian cosmology. This was not a conventional burial. The absence of decomposition, the positions of the bodies, many of the skeletons, particularly those closest to the sarcophagus, had jade amulets or small jade fragments embedded within their bones, as if the stone itself had permeated their very being. The air in the tomb, once merely cold, now seemed to vibrate with a faint, almost imperceptible hum. But Professor Thorne, haunted by the vacant, terrified eyes of the long dead, understood the deeper, more terrifying truth. This was not merely an archaeological marvel. It was a monument to profound human cruelty, a testament to the lengths to which fear, ambition, and a twisted pursuit of immortality could drive a civilization. He saw the skeletal hands reaching out, not for comfort, but for air, for escape, for release. He heard the silent screams of those who had been forced to watch their own lives drain away, their minds intact, their bodies paralyzed, their spirits bound. A subtle frequency that resonated in the very core of their chests, a ghostly echo of the resonance machine that had once tormented the entombed. The exact details of the horrifying ritual were largely kept from the mainstream, carefully curated by the authorities to preserve the fragile sensibilities of the modern world. The faint hum, the pervasive coldness, the silent screams eternally etched onto skeletal faces. These were the echoes of the undying guard, a testament to a horrific pact, sealed in jade, lead, and obsidian beneath the indifferent gaze of the Zalosian sun. The prince was indeed guarded in death, eternally so, by the living torment of those who had been forced into an agonizing, perpetual vigil, their spirits forever bound to his silent slumber, their unspoken agony, a chilling legacy from a dark chapter of forgotten history. The story, once confined to the earth's depths, now whispered on the wind, a chilling reminder that some secrets are too terrible to remain buried forever, their haunting images forever imprinted on the canvas of human memory. The official narrative shifted to one of a unique funerary practice and devoted retainers, willingly accompanying their prince, downplaying the chilling evidence of living in. But for Professor Thorne and his team, the truth was an indelible mark on their souls, a haunting image that would forever linger in their minds. The unearthly glow from the jade lining the walls seemed to intensify, casting grotesque, dancing shadows that mimicked the agony of the figures slumped around them. And above all, the horrifying expressions pointed to something far more sinister than death. It was the terror of suffocation, of prolonged agony, of a mind slowly breaking as it realized its ultimate, inescapable fate. Thorne's mind, recalling the fragmented ancient texts he had dismissed as myth, began to piece together the unspeakable ritual, the binding of souls, the perpetual guardianship, the living entombment. These were not mere sacrifices. They were living batteries, their vitality and terror siphoned to sustain the prince's eternal slumber, their spirits forever bound to his, acting as his undying guard. The lead and obsidian shell had not prevented their suffering, but merely contained it, intensifying the resonance within the tomb, trapping their silent screams in a perpetual, unhearing darkness. Professor Thorne, his mind racing, recalled the scattered fragments of Zalosian folklore, the morbid myths that hinted at living sacrifices. But this was beyond anything he could have imagined. The truth, buried for millennia, was now staring them in the face, a horrifying testament to a perverted ritual. The air within the exposed chamber was cold, unnaturally so, and utterly still, as if time itself had frozen. It was a sight of breathtaking beauty, yet permeated by an unsettling sense of profound stillness, a silence that felt heavier than any sound. It was here that Professor Thorne, guided by an intuition he couldn't explain, focused his efforts. It was a labyrinthine structure, its passages lined with polished jade, its chambers seemingly designed for some unknown, sacred purpose. Not treasures, not funerary offerings, but human remains. Skeletons, perfectly preserved by the unique properties of the jade environment, lay slumped or propped against the walls and floor, surrounding the sarcophagus in a chilling tap. Their postures were disturbingly natural, as if they had simply collapsed where they stood, and on their faces, frozen in the perpetual stillness of death, was a uniform expression that transcended time and language. Wide, sightless eyes fixed in an expression of profound, unspeakable terror. Their mouths were agape, as if poised to unleash a scream that had never found release. The silence in the chamber was no longer serene. It was a deafening, terrifying void, amplifying the silent screams of the long dead. And then, in the heart of the complex, they found it, a grand central chamber, dominated by an intricately carved jade sarcophagus. It lay on a raised dais, radiating a soft, persistent glow. Professor Thorne, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and trepidation, approached the sarcophagus, his hand tracing the ancient, familiar Xylosian script carved into its surface. The inscription spoke of Prince Theron, of his ascension, and of his eternal Jade Guard. It was an ambitious undertaking, fraught with challenges. The desert winds constantly shifted the sands, burying and unburying secrets with capricious ease. It was a thick, dark, and incredibly hard layer, defying conventional digging tools. Tests revealed it to be a unique composite of lead and obsidian, meticulously fused together, forming an impenetrable barrier. The discovery baffled Thorne and his team. Why would such a massive, impervious shell be constructed around anything, let alone buried so deep? It hinted at a secret of immense importance, something so vital it needed to be completely sealed from the outside world. The sheer engineering feat alone spoke volumes of the civilization's advanced capabilities, but also of a profound, almost paranoid desire for concealment. But persistence, fueled by the tantalizing hints of a unique, jade-rich culture, eventually paid off. The air around the excavation site grew strangely heavy, a persistent, unidentifiable hum, occasionally vibrating through the ground, unnoticed by most, dismissed by the few who felt it as machinery noise. But Professor Thorne, a man sensitive to the subtle nuances of his sights, often felt a chilling coldness emanating from the depths, even in the blistering desert heat. He dismissed it as a trick of the air currents, but the feeling persisted, an unsettling intuition that something profoundly unnatural lay beneath. A team of dedicated archaeologists, led by the renowned Professor Aris Thorne, a man whose life had been dedicated to the study of ancient cultures, finally stumbled upon the first definitive signs of Xylosian civilization. It began with the occasional discovery by nomadic tribes, a perfectly preserved jade carving unearthed by a flash flood, a strange, dark stone unlike any found in the region. These artifacts were treated with a mixture of awe and fear, often re-buried, their origins shrouded in mystery. There were anomalies, whispers from a forgotten age, too unsettling to be fully embraced. The meticulous suppression by High Priestess Lyra and her successors had been remarkably effective. The lead and obsidian shell had successfully muted the psychic echoes of the tormented spirits within, silencing the earth's lament and allowing the living to forget the unspeakable horror buried beneath their feet. The land itself seemed to heal, its gardens once again blooming, its mines producing jade without the unsettling hum. The memory of the living entombment became a chilling echo, a phantom limb of history that few could feel. But the earth, in its vast, slow-moving indifference, never truly forgets. Then, in a period roughly equivalent to our own 20th century, a new era dawned. The age of archaeological excavation. It began with a series of minor jade finds, intricate tools, ceremonial vessels. The initial excavations revealed layers of compacted earth, and then a dense, unusual stratum unlike anything they had encountered before. The sheer difficulty of penetrating the lead obsidian shale forced the team to employ cutting-edge technology, painstakingly chipping away at the ancient barrier, day by agonizing day. After months of grueling labor, the team finally breached the lead obsidian shell. As they cautiously ventured deeper, the true scale of the jade construction became apparent. But it was what surrounded the sarcophagus that truly froze the blood in their veins. The archaeologists, hardened by years of unearthing the macabre, were utterly unnerved. As they examined the bodies more closely, a chilling detail emerged. The terror on the faces of the skeletons was not the fear of a sudden, violent death. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. News of the jade tomb spread like wildfire, capturing the morbid fascination of the world. The tomb was eventually sealed again, deemed too sacred, too unsettling, too profoundly disturbing to remain open to the public. The jade tomb of Prince Theron became a whispered legend among archaeologists, a chilling, cautionary tale of ancient power and unspeakable sacrifice.